On this AVNation special, we talk with Extron about their brand new product, NAV. Is Extron's step into the AV over IP market. We talk with them about how it works and why they decided to develop their own codec. All that and more next on this AVNation special.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is an AVNation special, Extron's NAV. This is Tim Albright with AVNation with an AVNation special. We are talking with Andrew Evans from Extron about their Extron's new NAV networked AV product. What it is it's Extron's take on Pro AV over the IP. System is using Extron's own Pure 3 codec. It will transport 4K 6444 over 1 gig or a 10 gig infrastructure. Andrew Evans is the manager of product marketing with Extron. Welcome, sir.
Thanks, Tim. Really excited to be here and have this opportunity to talk to you guys.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing: you guys have this is your step into networked AV, right? You've had Twisted Pair products for several years, but this is the first one that is really utilizing the network. Obviously, not the first company to do it, but this is your guys' own take. The thing I find interesting about it, and this is based on the press release and the documents you guys gave us, is you're using your own chipset, your own codec called Pure 3. So why did you decide to develop your own codec?
Sure. So we looked at the market really, and it seemed as if there was an opportunity to really differentiate our product from some of the other things that are out there. And the codec being one of those really key places where we could offer some value to the Pro AV market. A lot of the products that we've seen in the marketplace have really been using a codec that was generally developed for other industries. So whether it was originated in like a digital cinema or maybe a broadcast environment, they kind of got repurposed into our Pro AV space. But what Extron had with Pure 3 is a codec that was really foundationally intended to be used by this market. So we wanted to take that engineering expertise that we had with Pure 3 and really leverage that for our entry into this Pro AV over IP space.
All right. So what is then unique about, because you said you focus this on from the Pro AV space, not cinema, not broadcast. What's unique about NAV then?
Sure. So because our codec was really our own engineering, it's our patented technology, we were able to look at really 3 key areas. We looked at latency, bitrate, and image quality. And so competitive codecs typically are going to address 1 or maybe 2 of those areas. So they might give you good image quality and have low latency, but it might be at the expense of requiring a lot of bandwidth. So what we wanted to do was not have any compromises in our product so that we could still give you the really high image quality, very low latency, and still use data rates that were acceptable in the IT domain. So giving people the ability to control how much data rate they were actually consuming. And that was one of the really key differentiators for our NAV products, being able to deliver all 3 of those things with a lot of control over those elements.
You said no compromises on that. What does that mean to you?
So for us, it means that we didn't have to pick just 1 or 2 of those 3 areas. Okay. If you're going to evaluate like a codec for performance capabilities, you can always look at the latency, the bit rate, and the image quality. And that's going to be pretty universal in how you can compare different products. So for us, no compromise meant we didn't pick just 1 or 2 of those areas. We wanted to be able to really deliver a really strong offering that hit all 3 of them.
All right. Your documentation says that you can do either 1 gig or 10 gig networks to push NAV down the pipe. How does that work?
Sure. So because we are coming into a marketplace that already has AV over IP products in it, people have been kind of forced into 2 camps. There are products that operate on a 1 gigabit system, and then there are other products that are in a 10 gigabit. But there wasn't any place or any company that was really bridging those two. So we saw that as another opportunity for us. And because of our Pure 3 codec, that actually gives us a lot of control over the amount of compression that we use on that video signal. So we actually can run on either 1 gig or a 10 gig infrastructure. So by having that control of our codec, we can actually take a 10 gig encoder and adjust that bit rate down to a 1 gig range so that a 10 gig encoder can stream to a 1 gig decoder. And where that really becomes interesting is when you look at enterprise deployments. So within a room, you might want to have 10 gig switching so that you have the highest quality image possible. But if that same space needs to also send the signal to an overflow room or a breakout room for like an all hands meeting, then you might need to adjust that bit rate so that your other decoders across the enterprise can receive that same stream. So we've got that flexibility that lets us really bridge those 1 gig and 10 gig infrastructures.
So let me understand this. So you can, to the 10 gig encoder in this specific instance, can stream to obviously multiple endpoints, multiple nodes that are 10 gig decoders, but that same stream then can be compressed down, or is it, if you're sending it to a 1 gig decoder, all the streams then are 1 gig?
So we would adjust the single stream down so that the 1 gig decoders could pick it up.
Okay. All right. You mentioned compression. Every product on the market that does AV over IP has some sort of compression. How is Extron handling then this compression? What are we losing when we compress?
Sure. So when you start looking at the data rate of video coming in, 4K 60 videos probably going to be in the around 12 gigabit range for the actual active video portion itself. When you remove all the overhead and the other elements to it, you're looking at about a 12 gig signal. So to get that down a 10 gig pipe, pretty low compression ratios are needed. But when you start to look at how you get that video down a 1 gig pipe, you're now talking 12 to 1 compression or higher even.
Yeah.
So to do that, a lot of people take either a spatial compression or a temporal compression approach. So you're either compressing within the actual frame of video itself, or you're looking at multiple frames, maybe dropping frames in order to get your bit rate down to fit that 1 gig or that 10 gig pipe. But what's really unique with Pure 3 is a technology that we've baked into it called intelligent selective streaming. And what we're doing with the intelligent selective streaming is evaluating at a very granular level the video signal coming in. And before the first frame even arrives, we know whether there's a difference between that frame and the previous frame. So we're able to evaluate, does that data actually need to be sent across the network? And if it's a duplication of information, we actually don't send it. So we're reducing our bit rate across the network by taking out the redundant information. So that's one of the ways that we're able to keep our bit rates down really low through our compression scheme while still delivering really high quality video. So we're not having to drop frames, we're not having to do as much compression on the actual full frame of video itself.
Yeah, depending on what the actual source is. Is that, to be clear here, that's happening on the encoder side, right? So you've got let's say an HDMI signal coming into the encoder. The encoder is the one who's actually physically comparing those frames.
Exactly right. Yeah, all the heavy lifting is being done on the encode side. So we're looking at that incoming video and we're processing that before it's actually streamed across the network.
Okay. All right. What market do you guys see this being the biggest focus for you guys?
Sure. So really, I would say anybody who's looking to design a system that has a lot of flexibility and scalability. So AV over IP systems really fit well into those applications that might have a really asymmetrical number of inputs and outputs. So that's a really key opportunity for AV over IP. The other place that we see it fitting in really well are people who want to scale their video distribution across the enterprise. Places where you might have had traditionally lots of core matrix switchers, but you want to streamline some of that routing of your video. As far as vertical markets go, really anybody could take advantage of the technology, whether that's a higher education campus that wants to distribute video from a lecture auditorium over to an overflow room. It could be a local government facility that wants to do IP, KVM type applications where they need to create small video walls and still have some USB routing separate from that. So it could go a lot of different places, quite honestly.
When it comes to designing and maintaining these systems, how will integrators and consultants design a system with NAV at its core?
Sure. So designing an AV over IP system in some ways is really similar to still designing an HDBaseT type system or a circuit switch type system. You still have the equivalent of transmitters and receivers in the system. We just call those encoders and decoders now. But instead of having a matrix switcher in the core of your design, that's going to be replaced by an IT type appliance like a switch, a router, or a combination. And that side is where it starts to get a little bit interesting. We've heard about the AV IT convergence occurring in our industry for 15, 20 years now, something like that.
Almost, yeah.
So we're actually starting to get to the point where some of those skill sets are being forced on us. So we do need to take a look at the actual network topology that's being used for the transport of these signals. Because it is multicast streaming, you do need to have multicast enabled on the IT network. You're going to want to have probably a layer 3 switch so you can do some management of those streams and the routing and control of bandwidth. So there are some details that go into it, but it's really pretty straightforward once you get the IT network set up.
Because these one thing that I've learned over the last couple of years as a number of these products have hit the market, these are nodes, right, that are on a network. How will they be managed on your NAV AV over IP network?
Sure. No, you're definitely right. Once you start having these nodes across the network, there really are two people who need to manage it, right? There's the AV manager who has the burden of understanding, is HTTP encryption part of my signal stream, and do I actually get that video across? But then there's also the IT manager who wants to understand where that device is, how much bit rate is it consuming, and what's the overall health of my video distribution system. So we kind of bring those two needs together into a single appliance, and that's our Navigator product.
Okay.
And the Navigator sits on the same network as all of these encoders and decoders, these nodes on the network. And it gives you this single point of access where you can look at the status of all of your encoders, decoders, what routes are made, or where your streams are being sent. You can adjust the bit rates that are being used. You can really use that as your dashboard for the entire system, knowing the status of your AV over IP products.
You mentioned two folks that needed to handle this information, so you kind of answered my next question. Beyond though the AV manager and the IT manager, and those are local folks, right? So these are people that work for the institution, the Fortune 500 company, the campus. Beyond that, is there any value in having the integrator, the AV integrator, not only on setup, integrate with or interface with your Navigate product, but giving them access and helping them, help their client, manage all these nodes?
Totally. So from the reseller, the integrator's perspective, the Navigator really becomes a powerful tool for the deployment of the product. So when it comes to actually having to push all of these IP configurations into the encoders, the decoders, being able to assign them to a room, to a name, name the inputs, the outputs, all of that's done through the Navigator itself. And there's a lot of things that we've done within the software interface of the Navigator that makes it really easy for the integrator to discover their devices, to set those IP addresses, and to be able to stand up that AV over IP solution really quickly.
So let me understand this, because some folks are different, some products are different. Is the navigator essential to every deployment, or are there situations where I can have a single encoder and a single decoder and I wouldn't need a navigator?
So if you've got a really small system and you want to do point-to-point extension, as an example, but still leverage that AV over IP technology, you would not need a navigator in those instances. You can even deploy a small number of endpoints without the navigator. You just lose a lot of that streamlined workflow when it comes to managing those devices and creating your ties or your routes from encoder to decoder. Instead of communicating to a single product, the navigator, you would actually have to communicate with each endpoint directly. Once you get over a certain threshold, though, you really would want to have the navigator as part of that system.
All right, and to be clear, all of these, like a lot of Extron products, have a built-in web server where you type in the IP address, honestly, of almost every Extron product I've ever installed, and that's the interface, and that's what you tie into. There's not a separate piece of software, is there?
No, we definitely don't have a separate piece of software. This is all done through the network, so it's a web portal using the embedded web server of the product.
Last couple of questions, important ones though. When will this NAV product be available?
Great question. So what we've seen in this space is that AV over IP projects typically have a little bit longer of a lead time. So we're introducing this product now in order to make sure that people have the awareness of it, so that for projects that they're designing in 2019 that consider Extron as a solution for them. So we're looking at availability really towards the end of first quarter of 2019.
Okay, so March, April-ish area. Another important question: what is roughly the price point? And yes, there are several different models and volumes. And if you can't answer intelligent, that's fine. But just a rough estimate.
Sure. So it's kind of tough to nail down the exact price, because we do have products that are 1 gig predominantly, or 10 gig with the fiber interfaces. Some support USB, some don't. So it really is a kind of a range of prices. And quite honestly, the way that we've got it set up is that we want to have our resellers and our integrators call us for the opportunity, so that we can work through them to understand the needs of the system before we get too bogged down in the pricing of it. So it's all call for price at this point. But we understand that it's a competitive space. We certainly aren't going to be the low cost option, but we think that we're going to deliver some value and still be competitively priced.
All right. Andrew, as we wrap up here, is there anything else that somebody needs to know as they're considering this? And as you mentioned, designing projects now that may be deployed next summer or next fall even?
Sure. I would say that the one thing I really wanted to drive home is that the performance is really, really remarkable. To be able to see in a real world application the original source material side by side with this Pro AV over IP solution is pretty astounding. It's one where most people have to get their nose up onto the display practically to see the difference in image quality. And for us to be able to deliver that kind of image quality with low latency and at bit rates that span both 1 and 10 gig infrastructures, I think it's going to really resonate with AV as well as IT professionals.
Well, hopefully that's not the actual use case, is putting your nose up against the display. So
let's hope not.
No, last question here. Several different people do it different ways. So I have to ask you this one. Do you require a special switch for this, a network switch?
Great question. So for us, we are looking at particular switches so that we can test and evaluate them, so that if people want a recommendation, we can certainly provide that kind of information to them. But as long as it's a layer 3 managed switch, then we're in good shape. We don't have any special requirements of the switch itself beyond just multicast enabled layer 3 management.
Okay, very good. All right, Andrew Evans from Extron. Thank you so much, sir. If somebody wants more information about Extron, about NAV, or just wants to tell you hi, how do they get a hold of you, or how do they get a hold of Extron?
Sure. Best place to go for the information is just www.extron.com. And then we've got the power search tool where they can look for the NAV solutions, as well as a microsite on the Pure 3 technology itself.
All right, very good. Andrew Edmonds from Extron Electronics. My name is Tim Albright. For more information about us, more programs like this, including our 2 weekly programs, one that looks like at the commercial AV space and one that looks at the residential, go by our website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.